It's patch week again, and that means it's time for another tier list below ELO. Today we're going to dive into patch 12.19, so let's take a look and see what's cracking. So some fairly routine buffs for champions struggling and some cheeky off-meta builds being buffed too, with a few champions AP ratios getting buffed, and then some expected nerfs too. Overall, not the biggest patch in the world, but we are looking forward to the Syndra update, so stay tuned on our channel to see a guide for that in the next few days. Before we get into the video, don't forget to check out our website and try out our desktop app. It's not just tier lists, because here you can get stats for all of your champions and all your teammates too. You can also see your success in certain matchups, ban recommendations, pocket pick suggestions, and tons more. We've also got a huge amount of content and educational videos for all individual champions too, so click the link in the description and see it all for yourself. In the S tier we have Singed, Poppy, Aatrox, Shyvana, Mordekaiser, Darius, Olaf, Garen, Nasus, and Maokai. That is a lot of champions in that S tier, but none in the God tier this week. So yes, you heard it correctly, Garen and Maokai move back up to the S tier, and guess what, so does Nasus. The big dog is back in the top lane with a vengeance. Camille, Tahm Kench and Malphite move from B to A, and Shyvana moves up from C to B. So Garen's getting some cheeky buffs to his E in his crit build this patch. And although he has dropped off a little bit recently, Garen has had a fantastic season in that top lane, especially so at low elo. Now, we've all played against a fed Garen before, and let's be honest, it's not a fun experience. And if he builds like a crit based monster, he just walks around one-shotting you. Well, this patch we expect Garen to shoot straight back up to that S tier. And it's safe to say it's going to be a pretty terrifying experience when he is fed. Garen is very easy to play, so that ticks off that low elo box already. But he's also just really easy to carry with. You stomp the lane and you stomp the game. And as long as you don't run it down 1v5 and lose your lead easily, you're probably going to win the game if you play it correctly. Garen's unique crit high damage build will only get better this patch. So as long as you're building him the right way, you're going to really see the difference. Now, one top laner recently that's just started absolutely slapping is Maokai. We have already spoken about him in recent videos and recent tier lists, but we just need to reiterate just how good he is. If you're a fan of playing tanks in the top lane, setting up ganks and basically just team fighting by absorbing as much damage as possible and setting up CC, then look no further than Maokai. He really does have it all, and to add to that, he's just so damn straightforward to play. His W is point and click, his Q is incredibly hard to miss, his saplings are a nice way to scout out vision and add a bit more damage, and then his ultimate is now much quicker and it ramps up throughout teamfights too, so it's just much easier to land. Now, whether you're peeling, diving, engaging, or whatever you want to do in a teamfight, you're always going to be impactful, as long as you're not a walking minion because you're too far behind. So the moral of the story when playing Maokai is, don't enter the early game, get a little bit of farm, set up ganks when your jungler's there, and get ready to teamfight. Aatrox has been absolutely everywhere at every single rank at the moment. I mean, you basically see him every single game if he's not banned, and patch 12.19 is another patch with no nerfs to him. We have seen some changes to Eclipse this week, which is his main mythic to go for, but we just don't think it's going to make too much difference. Aatrox is the definition of a raid boss top laner. You play an AD carry in the bot lane, you're having a good time, you're farming, you've got a few kills under your belt, and the next thing you know, you've got a level 17 Aatrox running at you, dealing crazy amounts of damage and healing everything back off again. Yes, this champion really is a menace at the moment. So if you are a top lane main and you aren't playing him, you probably should, and if you're not, you probably should be banning him too. Moving into the jungle now, and in the God tier we still have Fiddlesticks. In the S tier we have Bel'Veth, Mordekaiser, Master Yi, Amumu, Rammus, Volibear, Zac, Nunu and Shyvana. Nunu and Shyvana have both moved up to the S tier this week, and they swap with Rek'Sai, who moves down a tier. Maokai and Ekko move from B to A, Xin Zhao moves up from C to B, and Kayn falls from A to B. Bel'Veth is pretty much dominating the jungle at all ranks at the moment. She's just in a really good spot, she has so many good qualities, she's very hard to shut down, she's very hard to catch, and she's also very easy to play too. She sounds and looks very complicated, but basically she's a Master Yi with a better defensive ability in her E. She scales like a demon with that permanent attack speed she gets from her passive, and the damage she can deal with a few items with her auto attacks, with her abilities, and she can jump into those void corals as well and deal some pretty good AoE true damage too. Dragons take a long time to kill now, and Bel'Veth absolutely melts them, which just adds to many of her qualities at the moment. And she really is one of those champs at the moment that if she does get fed, you just instantly get a lot more worried than normal. Bel'Veth is the kind of jungler that you can pick into most matchups at the moment, which is really what defines a good champion, to be honest. If they're fairly blind pickable in this patch, you can probably get away with anything. Next up, we've got Shyvana, who's definitely not quite as blind pickable as Bel'Veth, but she's definitely going to have a much better time this week. Shyvana's had a fairly good season, to be honest. She's had some patches where she's been dominant, she's had some patches where she's fell off, but recently she has been a little bit quieter. This patch though, they've buffed a lot of her AD and AP ratios, and this is going to encourage people to get a bit creative with her builds, but either way we think she's going to be really strong in the jungle. As we mentioned with Bel'Veth, taking dragons quickly is a really good strength at the moment. and Shyvana can take them really easily, and she gets those bonus resistances once she kills them. Now you can go for a bruiser type build with Blade of the Ruin King and Frostfire Gauntlet. You can go for that AP setup with Nash's Tooth and just go full AP, or you can go a mixture of the two or neither altogether, but either way Shyvana has a lot of versatility in what she can build. We think we're going to see a lot more Shyvana this patch. She has really good jungle clears, her ganks aren't too bad, but she really does scale well and takes down those objectives so easily. She's definitely one to keep your eye out for this patch, and if you enjoy her, now's the time to revisit her. So Ekko's been buffed and we haven't really seen too much of this guy for quite some time. There are quite a few people that really enjoy this champion. I for one definitely think he's a really fun champion to play, but he has felt a little bit lackluster. Now if you do get fed, you're always going to pop off, but if you don't, you kind of just don't really do much at all. The fact that his passive AP ratio is getting buffed though is a huge buff, because not only does this help your burst damage, but it also really helps your jungle clear too, because this is an easy way to clear camps. You just auto them or Q them a few times and they just pop in an instant. They're also buffing Ekko's AP ratio on his ultimate too though, which is also a really good change. Recently landing a 5-man ultimate with Ekko hasn't felt as rewarding as it has in the past, so this change with a bit more damage is definitely going to make a difference. Ekko definitely does take a bit of practice. He's a bit of a middle of the pack jungler. He's not the best at ganking or clearing, but he has a good combination of the two. But for all those Ekko fanatics and one-tricks out there, this is going to be a great patch for you guys. Let's hop into the mid lane now, and in the god tier we have Swain and Vex. In the S tier we have Diana, Zed, Vladimir, Akshan, Victor and Seraphine. Varus and Ziggs both join the A tier, Ahri moves down from A to B, and Seraphine takes her place back in that S tier. Syndra has been completely underwhelming to say the least this season. She's had a terrible time all year, and even more so when that durability patch hit. Well, she's now receiving a pretty big update, and it's bringing along some absolutely huge gameplay changes. Her passive is now completely different and makes her scale like an absolute monster. She now collects splinters throughout games, and once she's got all 120 of them, which is the maximum, her AP increases by 15%. So it seems they're aiming to make her a bit more of a scaling powerhouse. Syndra's ultimate now automatically executes enemies below 15% health. And there's some other decent changes too, which we're going to cover in our Syndra guide that's coming out later this week. Stay tuned for that one. We're not going to change Syndra's placements in the tier list just yet, but we're going to let you guys know how good or bad she is in next week's update. AP Varus Mid is still underplayed and terrorizing everyone that he plays against. So we've added Varus into the A tier. He has stuck around. It's not just flavor of the month anymore. This is actually a really good pick in the right games. AP Varus absolutely melts any type of target. You got a tank running at you at full pelt, you're probably just going to one-shot them. And as soon as you've got those core items like your Riftmaker, your Nash's Tooth and your Ravenous Deathcap, you can melt anybody. He is a little bit matchup dependent though. If you do get someone that can dive you and assassinate you, you're going to struggle to get going. But if you can stay safe, stay efficient and farm well, you're going to be a bit of a monster. This is also really fun to play with too. So all you mid lane mains, if you haven't tried it yet, I'm sure you've played against it, you should definitely give it a go. Fizz hasn't been doing too well recently either, but he has got a little buff this patch to his ease AP ratio. Fizz does have his place and has done for a while, but he's just been a little bit less popular recently. Now if you get the right games when you're against a Lux or a Xerath, you can dodge all their skill shots and just snowball easily, you're probably going to pop off and win the game. But unfortunately, this is kind of where it's ended for Fizz recently. If you don't have that perfect draft where you can snowball and carry, you're probably not going to be able to do too much. Well, this isn't going to change drastically for Fizz, but this AP ratio buff will make a bit of a difference and those Fizz mains will definitely notice it. We aren't going to move his placement, he is going to stay put for now. But just remember, every time a champion gets buffed, they are played more often. So be careful blind picking those skill shot champions in the mid lane this week. Moving down to that bot lane now then, and in the god tier we have Misfortune and Seraphine. In the S tier we also have Jhin and Tristana. Jinx moves up with her buffs from B to A, Ziggs moves back into B from the C tier, and Twitch moves down from S to A. Now aside from the obviously super strong AD carries though, there are just so many marksmen in a great spot at the moment. Look how stacked that A tier is. All of these guys can seriously pop off when picked in the right game, so it's a really good time to be an AD carry main if you like a bit of champion diversity. So as we mentioned, Jinx is getting some buffs this patch. It's her base AD and her ultimate damage. She was completely dominant for such a large part of this season, but she has really fallen off after a few too many nerfs recently. If you can pick her in the right lanes now, she's definitely going to come back to being a really good pick, similar to most of the champions in the A tier. You've always got to be a bit careful in the early game on Jinx, so those lane bullies like Misfortune who can really dominate you and put you behind and prevent you from scaling. But if you do manage to get ahead in the lane phase on this champion, you're going to pop off when it comes to those team fights. Jinx's AoE burst damage is mental, and her passive resets are just so fun to play with. Whether you're popping people down at long range with those rockets and sniping them with your ultimate, or kiting like a beast with your minigun. Jinx has always been one of my personal favourite AD carries to play, so it's really nice to get a buff from my point of view. But we can definitely understand why she did get nerfed previously, because she was a bit crazy. If you do see the right matchup, you're not against a hard engaging support and you're not against a big lane bully like Misfortune, Jinx is definitely one to pick up again. Kai'Sa is another scaling monster in that bot lane. She has been picked and played quite a lot in Worlds already, and if you can play her, you can get to that stage where you can really dominate, then she's a great champion to play. Kai'Sa does have those obvious weaknesses like her low range, but it is offset with her ability to burst and snowball. The burst damage she offers with that passive with her W and Q as well is really underrated. And if you combo this with a really aggressive support like a Maokai, you can actually get really fed in the early game. And when you do get fed on Kai'Sa, you're one of the hardest AD carries to shut down because of your burst damage, your kite potential with that E when it's evolved, and of course your ultimate. I'd say Kai'Sa does take a bit more practice than some of the other AD carries in the A tier. But if you are a fan of Kai'Sa, it's a really good time to play her at the moment. She's also getting some AP ratio buffs this patch too, so it's going to be interesting to see what kind of builds people come up with. Maybe we're going to see a return of the Nash's Tooth hybrid build. We'll see. Ziggs has been really quiet recently and we haven't seen him in that bot lane for quite some time, but he's actually making a bit of a comeback. The people that are playing Ziggs are having really good results at the moment, so we have popped him back into the B tier. Now Ziggs has always had that strength of his fantastic wave clear. He's got really good solid poke in lane, he scales really well, and if you go for that Liandry setup, you're probably going to top the damage charts, especially if you get into that late game. Ziggs is a great option to go for if you're lacking AP in the rest of your team, but he's also really good with so many different supports and so many different matchups too. You can play it alongside those engaging supports like Leona and chase kills and get those big burst combos off, or you can play it alongside those peeling enchanters who can help keep you alive, help you scale, and help you stay alive in teamfights too. Not too many people are still playing Ziggs though, so don't expect it to see it every game, but if you are looking for a new pocket pick, Ziggs is a great choice. Finishing off with those supports then, and of course in the god tier we have Janna, yet again. Lots of solid S tier choices too though in Maokai, Soraka, Renata Glask, Amumu, Sona, Zilean and Nami. Yes, Maokai and Sona move up into the S tier this week, Seraphine, Lux and Leona and Pyke all move up from B to A, and Rell also joins them in the A tier from that C tier. Zyra moves down from S to A and Senna moves down from A to B. Sona hasn't been quite as popular as she was towards the start of the season recently, but she's getting some pretty juicy buffs this week and this is probably going to make her see a bit of a return. Sona's just one of those champs in a support role that you never mind having on your team as long as they don't run it down in the lane phase. Sona's scaling utility is almost unrivaled. The amount of movement speed she grants to her teammates, the healing is insane, and of course she's got that 5-man ultimate to set up team fights and peel for her teammates. Sona only gets better as the game goes on, and once she's got those improved healing items, she's got a bit of shielding, she's got a bit of damage, she really does become quite a handful. Another great thing about Sona too is she fits so well into so many different team comps. You can play her with pretty much any AD carry or even AP carry in the bot lane, and as we said earlier, as long as you don't get too far behind in the early game, you're always going to be useful. Rell is a champion we just don't see very often, but her win rate at the moment is a bit of a joke. And by that we mean it's crazy high. Rell is a very situational support to go for. You can't pick her into so many different matchups and you can't pick her with any AD carry. But if you pick her with the right one like a Samira, it's pretty insane how strong you can be. Rell has that pretty obvious weakness, which is she's incredibly slow once she's engaged. She comes off a horse and she walks around like she's got no legs. But if you can play it on your own terms, you can set up those ganks, you can set up those big team fights in the early game around Dragon, you can honestly offer so much crowd control. And if you have the right AD carry to follow up, the right team comp to follow it up, you're probably going to win the game because you're just going to win every single team fight. Rell takes a bit of practice, she takes a bit of coordination, so she's definitely one to play in duo queue. But if you can pull it off, she's so good right now. We're keeping her in the A tier due to just how situational she is. A support that isn't too situational though is Nami, and she is doing much better at the moment. Over the last few patches, she's just got better and better, and she's probably the most jack of all trades support in the game at the moment. You can pick her with anything, you can play her with anything, you can play her alongside anything, and you're probably going to do well. You offer sustain, you offer crowd control, a good amount of burst damage with your E, and if you time your E correctly alongside certain bursty champions, you're just going to one-shot people. Nami might not quite offer just as much utility as the likes of Janna and Renata Glask, but she does offer more sustain, she offers more versatility, and she offers a lot more damage too. The amount of burst damage you encourage with your E is pretty much unrivaled for any other enchanter. I mean, she literally is the only reason Lucian is still viable. This lane is still very strong, and the fact that no one's running Electrocute on Nami is actually probably buffing her in the long run because Summon Aerie just makes her scale so much better. Nami is one of those supports that you never really mind having on your team whether you're an AD carry main or you're anywhere else on the map. She offers a good amount of impact in so many different ways. So if you're looking for a really consistent support pick to go for, choose Nami. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of this patch 12.19 tier list video for Low-Elo. A fair few funky champion changes in this one, so let's see how it's going to pan out. We didn't mention some other champions getting some crazy AP ratio buffs like Blitzcrank and Twitch, but we don't think their tiers are going to move too much. Don't forget to check back next week for updated tier list video, which we do a week after the patch drops to talk about all those champions changed and affected and see how they're all getting on. You can see the full Low-Elo tier list on our website by clicking the link in the description, and we also have our High-ELO tier list on there too. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.